Queen Sugar. 3 days ago, Charlie Bordelon and her 11-year-old daughter Micah locked up the rented Spanish bungalow with its cracked tile roof and tumble of punch-colored bugabia and left Los Angeles for good. In an old Volvo wagon with balding tires and a broken air conditioner, they followed the black vein of highway, first skirting the edge of Joshua Tree, where the roasted wind roared in their faces, then braving the Mojave Desert. They pushed through Arizona and New Mexico and sailed over the Texas prairie. 24 hours later, they crossed into Louisiana, where the cotton and rice fields stretched away in a lavish patchwork of pale greens and browns, and 100 miles after that, where the rice and cotton fields yielded to the tropical landscape of sugar cane country. Now, it was the next morning, their first full day in St. Josephine Parish. They hadn't seen a house or car since they turned off the old Spanish trail, and the road which crossed over Bayou Teche was leading them farther away from town, farther out of the country. And Charlie, who'd never seen real sugar cane before yesterday, thought she should have trusted her instincts, thought if she just listened to that small voice that whispered, "Take the map," they'd be there by now. Instead, she'd listened to her grandmother, Miss Honey, with whom she and Micah now lived. "Put that away," Miss Honey had said at breakfast that morning as Charlie spread the map over the kitchen table. "I know how to get there. Just let me get my purse." Now here they were, Charlie and Micah and Miss Honey, wandering hopelessly like three blind stooges through South Louisiana's cane country, creeping down one ragged back road till it dead-ended in a grass-choked gully before trying another, while the sun got hotter and the air grew soupier, burning up precious time as they searched for the turnoff that would lead Charlie to her fields. She had inherited 800 acres of sugarcane land from her father, Ernest. For the last 10 months, she had pored over more aerial photos and assessor maps than she cared to count, signed documents, and place phone calls. She had planned what she could from a distance. The fields Charlie had thought of for almost a year were out there, somewhere. Land she had to get ready to harvest in October. God help us, she thought. It was 8:45. Charlie was supposed to meet Wayne Frazier at 9. A cup of community coffee with its bitter note of chicory had made her queasy. Maybe it was the coffee, maybe not, Charlie thought, as she remembered how her mother accused her of being a city girl and warned her not to make this move. Charlie swore her mother was wrong, but now she thought maybe it was true. She was accustomed to measuring distance in freeway off-ramps, not hectares or miles, weighing things in pounds rather than bushels or tons. The only crops she ever harvested were the Meyer lemons that hung lazily from the trees along her backyard fence. The only soil she had ever tended came in bags from the Home Depot. She exhaled heavily. If she were a country girl, she thought, she could scan the horizon and know which of these godforsaken roads led to her fields. But she wasn't a country girl, not even a little. Charlie turned to her window and caught a scent of Louisiana on the June breeze. The aroma of red clay, peppery as cayenne, musty as compost, and beneath it, a hint of mildew and Gulf water. She marveled at how different the landscape was from anything she'd known back in California. The stretch of Highway 5 between Los Angeles and San Francisco, with its endless miles of almond and pistachio orchards, vast stretches of orange groves whose blossoms perfumed the air on an early spring morning, rolling acres of grape vineyards, tomato and cotton fields, and, of course, the uninterrupted miles of reeking cattle lots. All of it with the spiny silhouette of the Sierra Nevada like a promise along the horizon. Charlie imagined Los Angeles with its traffic and smog and relentless sprawl, and beyond it, the never-ending coastline and immeasurable Pacific, ridiculously beautiful in the honey light of a sunny Southern California afternoon. Now the vast Pacific had been replaced by an ocean of sugarcane, waist-high stalks and slender, emerald green leaves with tilled soil between. Cane as far as her eyes could see. Charlie glanced at Miss Honey, dressed in a butter yellow polyester dress, belted high on her waist, ginger stockings rolled like donuts around her ankles, and white orthopedic sandals. She sat in the passenger seat, clutching her white leather purse. Charlie wanted to ask if they were getting close, but remembered how yesterday Miss Honey scolded her for arriving 3 hours late. "Well, it's about time. You said noon," Miss Honey had said, standing on the top porch step. "I started to think y'all had changed your minds." How Miss Honey had flicked that purple plastic fly swatter as if it were riding a crop, and reprimanded her for cutting her hair. "You used to have long, pretty hair," she said. "Good hair. Now you look like a man." More minutes passed. A weather-beaten farmhouse set back from the road, a cluster of small wooden shacks in the distance that looked strangely familiar. Were they driving in circles? "I'm sorry, Miss Honey," Charlie said, "but are you sure this is the right way?" "Of course I am," Miss Honey said. "If that man Frazier said your place was off the old Spanish trail, then this is the way. This used to be an Indian road." Micah, who had been fiddling with an ancient Polaroid camera Miss Honey had given her, reached over the back seat and tapped Miss Honey's shoulder. "You can't say Indian. It's Native American. Indian is offensive." "Oh, really?" Miss Honey said without turning around. "Do you know any Indians?" "Native Americans," Micah corrected. "Indians live in India." Miss Honey laughed, though Charlie thought it wasn't a laugh of delight or amusement. "Well, the Native Americans I know like to be called Indians," Miss Honey said, fingering her purse strap. "Bunch of them live in the woods behind my house." She turned to Charlie. "They built a big casino with a Mexican restaurant and a fancy steakhouse over in Charlton. Lights up the whole sky at night." Charlie nodded and was about to suggest they go gambling sometime, feed the slots, or take their chances at blackjack, when Miss Honey said, "Nothing over there but a pair of jackals, if you ask me. Jackals and sinners." They drove on. Out in the fields, a gaggle of laborers followed doggedly behind a tractor. Up ahead, the remnants of an old sugar mill, brick smokestacks, rusted corrugated siding, dust-caked windows loomed over the cane. Miss Honey dabbed her neck with a wad of tissue and smoothed her gray candy curls. "I can't stand riding in a car with no air conditioning." Charlie nodded and added tune-up to the list of chores she'd tackle as soon as they got back to Miss Honey's and she had ample time to unpack. "Baby," Miss Honey said, "look in that cooler and hand me a Coke." She raised her hand, palm side up, to her shoulder. Charlie recognized the gesture. Her father held his hands the same way, right down to the fingers curved as though he were gripping a ball. "Hand me a boiled egg," he said during their cross-country drives to St. Josephine when she was a girl, or "reach in there and give me a couple of those cookies." And she'd root around in the cooler he packed until she found what he asked for, excited to put just the right thing in her daddy's hand. Micah handed a bottle of Coke over the seat and Miss Honey twisted off the cap. She drew a small square packet from a purse, tore it open, and poured the contents, a tablespoon of powder the color and consistency of cornstarch, into the bottle. She swirled the mixture until a head of hissing foam rose along the glass. "What's that?" Micah asked. Miss Honey took a swig. "Stand back. I take it for my headaches." Charlie was no chemist, but she considered the properties of Coke. Water, corn syrup, a healthy dose of caffeine, and guessed at the stand back. Aspirin for the pain, a little sugar to cut the bitterness, some type of amphetamine for an extra boost, and figured the concoction would give quite a buzz. She wondered if Miss Honey nursed the concoction, closed her eyes, and leaned back against the headrest, if her grandmother wasn't mildly addicted. Michael leaned over the seat. "Can I try some?" "Don't even think about it," Charlie said, and both Micah and Miss Honey looked at her as if she just blurted out a string of swear words. I'm sure Miss Honey needs her medicine. There's water in the cooler if you're thirsty." "Why your father bought land way out here is beyond me," Miss Honey said a moment later. "If he wanted to own a business, he should have bought something in town. Russell Monroe has been trying to sell his barber shop for 2 years. I know he'd let it go for nothing. And I hear some rich white fella from New Orleans just bought the old bank building on Main Street. Gonna turn it into a snazzy hotel." She waved a dismissing hand toward the window. "There's no one out here but a bunch of crackers." Charlie felt her shirt clinging wetly to the knobs of her spine and debated whether to tell Miss Honey about how yesterday, soon after they crossed into the parish, she saw another car, a pickup, approaching fast in her rearview mirror. It rode her bumper, then slid parallel. "Don't look," Charlie had told Micah, though she couldn't help but look herself. The passenger, a white kid in a backwards baseball cap, stared at her for several long seconds. He surveyed her car, then turned to the driver, who leaned forward. Charlie turned her gaze back to the road, but the driver kept pace with her, even though he was driving in the opposite lane. She held her breath. Her hand shook. Finally, the pickup pulled ahead, glided in front of her, and for what felt like forever, she couldn't see anything but the lettering on the tailgate, the silhouettes of 2 naked ladies on the mud flaps. She eased her foot off the brake and fell back. The truck gunned its motor, and seconds later it was gone, the glow of its brake lights disappearing as it rounded the curve. Were they in danger? Who could say, but for a moment, Charlie wondered what her father had been thinking to leave her a sugarcane farm in South Bumfuck, Louisiana. "You never know why people do what they do," Charlie said now, speaking louder so Micah could hear. "You just have to assume they're doing their best." And then she repeated the lines she'd been saying for the last 10 months, the lines that had become her mantra. "I think this move will be good for us. An adventure, a fresh start." Charlie wasn't just saying this for Micah's sake. She was saying it for her own. Because the truth was, she needed this farm. It was the opportunity she'd hoped for. Until now, her life hadn't gone the way she planned. She loved her job teaching inner city kids, but it barely paid the bills or ate into the mountain of grad school loans. She drove a car that should have been scrapped for parts and lived in a house she'd never owned. She was 34 and widowed and may just have been a terrible mother. She needed this farm, wherever it was. She needed a second chance. She needed momentum and a good shove. "I reckon," Miss Honey dabbed her neck with her tissue again. "Don't get me wrong, I'm glad y'all here. It's been too long. But sometimes you go looking for adventure, all you find is disaster." "What do you mean, disaster?" Micah said. "What's going to happen?" "It's just a saying," Charlie said. but for good measure, she decided not to mention the pickup or how, for the rest of the drive, she pulled over every time a truck came up behind them. The paved road they'd been following led to a dirt path, a generous way to describe the strip of trampled ground deeply rutted with tread marks and grass growing up between. A wooden stake with the carved letter L leaned to one side. Charlie felt a rush of excitement, a warm tingling that spread over her arms and down her spine, causing her to feel a little lightheaded. This is it. Dust billowed behind the bowl until the path ended at a bank of trees. Woods stood tall and impassable to the left, but up ahead to the right sprawled open space. Charlie's heart raced as she imagined what was out there. Fields so splendidly verdant she'd feel short of breath just looking at them. Her father left the door open and she had stepped through it. Charlie parked, then she, Micah, and Miss Honey made their way over the clotted ground. "Holy moly!" Micah cried. "It's huge!" She took a picture with the ancient Polaroid, then hurled a stick far into the tangled weeds and creeping vines. "My God," Charlie muttered. "This can't be." Across the field, wide and long as 10 city blocks, stunted cane stalks dotted the earth. Their straggly leaves, a starved shade of pale green with deeply sunburned edges. Grass and weeds grew thick and matted between the rows, which were preposterously rutted with tire tracks. Even to Charlie's untrained eye, it was clear no one had been out there in months. Where were the neatly tilled rows, the lush cane plants high as a man's shoulders? Where was the moist soil, dark and rich as ground French roast? Under a morning sky coated with clouds gray as concrete, Charlie stared out over fields that should have looked like the hundreds of lush acres she passed on the drive down, but didn't. "I thought this Frazier fellow was managing the place," Miss Honey said, raising her hand to shield against the glare. "He was." Charlie twisted her wedding ring absent-mindedly. "The last time we talked, he said something about replacing a tractor belt." "Well, I say he's got some explaining to do." Charlie consulted her watch. They were 5 minutes late. "You think he's been here already and left?" "I couldn't tell you what it might do," Miss Honey said. "I don't know this Frazier from Adam's house cat." "I know where we should put the cows," Micah declared, peering through her camera's viewfinder. "They can live out by those trees." "This isn't that kind of farm," Charlie said. "But we can't have a farm without cows," Micah pressed. "What about goats?" "No goats." "Well, what then?" Charlie glared at her watch again, then squeezed the bridge of her nose. "Sweetheart, why don't you walk around and take some pictures?" White clouds, thick as mashed potatoes, drifted across the sky. Something that looked like a flat-winged bee bounced between the blossoming vines as hot air rose from the dirt. "My feet are starting to swell," Miss Honey said. "I'll be in the car." It was almost 10 o'clock before an old Ford F-150 with a "Jesus is my co-pilot" license plate rambled down the road ahead of a long contrail of dust. George Strait's crooning voice wafted through the truck's open window. A white man sat behind the wheel. "Thank God," Charlie waved. She had imagined Frazier as older, early 60s perhaps, and stocky as a lumberjack. She had imagined a man wearing embossed cowboy boots and a cowboy hat with a cane leaf braided around the band. But the man who climbed down from the truck looked much younger. Years of physical labor had worn any possibility of fat from his frame. His NASCAR jersey had Dale Earnhardt's picture on the front, and sun gilded his brown hair, which at the moment was wet. She walked over to greet him. "Mr. Frazier?" "Miss Baudelaire," Frazier said in that same flat tone she recognized from the phone. "Sorry about the time. It's an accident on the road." No, that's okay, Charlie said, extending her hand. It's nice to finally meet you, in person, I mean. Likewise. Fraser gave her a handshake that was firm but didn't say anything more. I've been waiting for this day for such a long time, Charlie gestured toward the fields. It's good to see everything for myself. I'd come down here sooner, but I had to wait for my daughter to finish school. Now that I'm here, though, I'm ready to get down to business. She waited for Fraser to respond, but he didn't. So Charlie, growing increasingly uneasy, plunged in deeper. I know we talked about all the work to be done, but I have more questions. For starters, I hope you don't take this the wrong way. I was looking at the fields and I noticed, well, they don't exactly look like I thought they would. Like they should. Yeah, well, Fraser threaded his thumbs through his belt loops. He was hardcore Nashville and Grand Ole Opry, Jim Beam, straight from the bottle. I don't mean to question your work, Charlie said. It's just that I passed plenty of other fields on my drive into town, and they were so neat, so orderly, and I thought yours would look better, Fraser said. Well, yes, but I don't want you to think I'm criticizing. Actually, Miss Bordelon. Fraser looked at Charlie with a pained expression, then straightened as though he practiced what he was about to say. I won't be working for you. You won't be what? I took another job. You what? Fraser fell silent. He looked down at the ground, then out over the fields. But when? Charlie said. Oh, why didn't you tell me? She stared at Fraser. He had an honest face, the kind you'd want to see if you were stranded alongside the road with a flat tire late at night. Are you working for someone else? Because of its money, I don't have much, but I'm sure we can work something out. Without thinking, she touched her wedding ring again, a platinum band that had been pounded thin in the back where the jeweler had made it larger. 6 angled prongs framed an enormous diamond that had belonged to Davis's mother before it became her engagement ring. My brother-in-law pulled some strings, Fraser said. Got me a job on the rig. Rig? Oil rig, Fraser said, out in the Gulf. Charlie twisted her ring so that the diamond pressed into her palm. But I just talked to you 2 weeks ago. You didn't say anything about another job. I know. I wanted to try it out first. You're kidding, right? This is a joke. We're supposed to harvest this cane in October. We only have 5 months. Fraser batted at the closest cane plant, then ripped a withering leaf from the stalk. I've been working cane since I was 16, Miss Bordelon. I'm ashamed to admit it. I don't have a penny saved. If I bust a knee, what I'll do? A couple years back, Mr. Lejeune took... Who? Mr. Lejeune, the man who owned this farm before your daddy. He got too sick to run this place himself. His kids stepped in. They weren't really interested. They were off in Orleans, riding on floats, going to balls, drinking Pim's Cup at the Columbus Hotel, the Columns Hotel. I won't be riding floats, Charlie said, and I've never heard of Pim's Cup. Mr. Fraser, please. Fraser crumpled the cane leaf in his palm. I had to beg him to plant enough cane last year, and they hardly took care of the cane that was here. When Lejeune died, they scraped by until they sold. Your daddy convinced me we could bring this place back, but now he's gone too. But I'm here, Charlie said. Give me a chance. Fraser shredded another cane leaf. I don't do something now, I'll run out of money before I run out of there. I don't want to be shooting folks at Walmart when I'm 65. But I was counting on you. I've been paying you. Fraser pulled 2 checks from his breast pocket, handed them to Charlie, and she saw they were the ones she'd mailed weeks ago. I've asked around. Problem is, this time of year, anyone worth hiring is already signed on for a job. Charlie touched Fraser's jersey as if it were the hem of his royal robe. If he wore a ring, she would have kissed it. She would have knelt if he'd asked her to. Please, Mr. Frazier, wait one season. You put me in a terrible bind. Frazier looked at her with great sympathy. Your daddy was a good man, he said. I never met him in person, but I could tell. And I could tell you a good person, too. He brushed his hands on his hands. But 2 more months and I get my union card. I'll have benefits. We both know I can't run this place by myself. Please, I'm begging you. It only seemed right to tell you in person. Charlie looked out at the fields. The cane seemed to have withered even more in the hours since she arrived. Birds whose chirp or singing she hadn't noticed until now seemed to mock her with their chatter. All this time and you never said a word. A tremendous lump thickened in her throat and she turned away, willing herself not to cry. She fully expected Frazier to leave, but he waited patiently, hands wedged deep in his back pockets. If you'd like to go over things, he offered. Somehow Charlie managed to write down the instructions he gave her, how to start the tractor, where to buy replacement parts, diesel and fertilizer, what tools were in the shop, directions to the ag station. She took notes, but had no idea what to do with them. At last, Frazier looked openly at his watch. I guess that does it. He turned to leave, stepping sure-footedly over the rusted clump of soil. At his truck, he paused. He's a good man. I hope you know that. Good luck to you, Miss Bordelon. And then he was gone. Once Frazier's truck disappeared, Charlie walked unsteadily back to the car where Miss Honey fanned herself with an envelope. How'd it go? Fabulous, Charlie said, sliding in. He's a gem, a real man of his word. She held herself together long enough to slip her keys into the ignition. The engine turned over, but as she shifted into reverse, Charlie thought about how much her life had slipped. 6 hours ago, she felt like a girl getting ready for a dance with lights and music and a new life stretched out before her like a red silk carpet. Now she was a girl who kept losing things. She lost her husband in the holdup. He just had to resist. And she almost lost her daughter. She lost her father to cancer. And now she was about to lose his strange and unexplained legacy, this sugarcane farm. She had a pad of notes she could barely read. Her manager had quit and she was out in the middle of God knows where. Charlie stopped the car. She took a long, deep breath. Then she hid her face in her hands and sobbed. When you stood there for so long, I had a feeling, Miss Honey said. She rubbed Charlie's back. At the feel of Miss Honey's touch, Charlie cried harder. I'm sorry. Miss Honey pressed a damp napkin from the cooler into Charlie's hand. That's okay, Shep. Let it out, she said. Because you got a big job ahead of you. And in a minute, you're going to have to pull yourself together. At the far edge of the field, Micah's yellow t-shirt and orange shorts flashed like banners against the brown earth as she started to run. Who learned to buy this place from? Miss Honey asked. Charlie wiped her eyes, watching her daughter approach some family named Lejeune. Miss Honey looked surprised. For a moment, it seemed as though she might say something, but she nodded and let Charlie collect herself. Look at these, Micah said, panting as she reached the car. She handed 4 Polaroids through the window before she saw Charlie's face. Mom? Why are you crying? Miss Honey, what's wrong with my mom? Miss Honey opened a bottle of water and offered it to Micah. Quiet, Jeff. Your mama's having a bad day.